Being the daughter of Hercule was hard enough when he was just a simple martial artist, but being the daughter of the King of Earth was even harder. Hey folks, MasakoX here. When it comes to Hercule, he is initially quite the straightforward character. In the original series, he was supposed to be the comedy relief, the one that was meant to instill the original MO of Dragon Ball in Dragon Ball Z, being the bungling buffoon who did have a heart of gold deep down. Sure, he was a bit of a showman that sometimes got on your nerves, but he had at least the desire to help and do good for Earth when the chips were down, or when genies got mad. That is worth celebrating and acknowledging. Credit where credit's due. He isn't the bravest one going in the show, but he can do something good. However, that could have easily gone awry and down another path. A path in which it led to something a lot more self-serving happening, something far more grandiose for himself. What if Hercule became King of Earth? And in turn, that led to his view on the world and his life going in a darker and more selfish direction. In the last part, we started off from the aftermath of the Cell games. Hercule was riding high off of the back of the battle and had done his trademark grandstanding with Jimmy Firecracker and laid claim to victory over the Bugman. Yeah, right. With the Dragon team not opposing this claim, wanting solitude, Hercule went on to be given what the world had to offer, and he took it with the greatest of gusto. He had money handed to him in droves, he had towns named after him, and that led to different ideas and delusions of grandeur happening in his mind, unlike the original story to that extent. And over time, Hercule felt like he could take on the world, and he was feeling superior with each waking day. In the end, it led to him ending up at loggerheads with King Fairy, the current King of Earth. All of the spiralling out of control after the doggy leader started to feel intimidated by Hercule's rise to power. It was too quick for his liking, and it ultimately proved to be right, but wrong to poke that particular beehive of activity. It led, ultimately, to his 40-plus year tenure as king to come to a screeching halt, and King Hercule to rise from his fumble and become the planet's new ruler. But for this part, we're going to be looking at this from a different perspective. Videl, Hercule's daughter and now technically Princess Videl of Earth. But does she want to be though? Things have been changing a lot lately, and mostly for the worse. For Videl, it had been a whirlwind of change, and things only got more swept up when her father had won that blasted election. But in every single moment that she ever looked back in retrospect to when things started to lose sense, it always started with Cell. Nothing was the same after her father faced that monster. She was one of only a few people on Earth that knew the truth behind what happened. She knew about this from her father telling her about it in a moment of weakness. For the cameras, she would play ball. Not ruining her father's dreams, obviously. It meant a lot to him. He had earned this moment of glory, that one at least. But something in her mind still forbid her to say defeated Cell with a clear conscience. She knew that he returned, changed her father. It was very odd to describe to oneself. On the surface, he was still his boastful, usual bubbly self. But when there was no one around to witness him, nobody to try and impress or look good for or signing something, he seemed very thoughtful, very withdrawn in himself. Unusually so. At first, things weren't too bad. Videl had chalked up these feelings of separation as nerves. Understandable. He had gone from just a potential rising star someday in martial arts in one particular field to now the savior of Earth, everybody loving him. Everybody wanted a piece of her father. Throughout the initial stint of him being a mayor, things didn't seem that different, at least for a while. They were bearable. Hercule did have good intentions going into it, and she respected them. In fact, she allowed herself briefly to embrace the experience. She naturally enjoyed the abundance of gifts and trinkets and activities that he and others would bring her, as well as all the cool and exotic places that they were going to celebrate his victory against Cell. Yeah, that was a good 6 months, she thought. If only things remained that way. But after a while, when things started to become more formulaic and far more driven by admin and red tape, Hercule became busy, slightly losing his touch with his fighting ways. Almost every 20 or 30 feet they walked, they needed to pose with a fan, to speak with an agent on the phone, maybe getting a call from the councillors trying to fix some problems in Hercule City. I mean, more often than not, someone else was caring for her rather than her father. It was an assistant or an intern. And granted, they were nice to her and often tried their best to make her happy, she knew that, but they just changed oh so frequently and so often that for Videl, they just became faceless. She started not even asking them their names. They were all the same, really. One day, though, she was out with her father when she got lost in the throngs of crowds and onlookers. One lady came by her, who was pregnant at the time. She was carrying some shopping and spotted that Videl looked lost. She had no idea who she was, and the lady offered to take her back to her parents. Videl was very grateful for that help from a kind stranger, and the lady was more than happy to help. However, the bodyguards weren't so thrilled. When the lady and Videl got back to the pickup point for the limo, the guards grabbed Videl and pushed the lady away without realizing she was pregnant, not seeming to care for it in fact. But the woman didn't fall back, but landed a right hook on one of the guards in retaliation. This lady was strong. Nobody was going to push her around. Videl was in awe. But then her father came around the corner, and when she turned around to thank the lady, she was gone. Hercule was relieved to see his daughter safe, but even that feeling had been tainted. In the past, her dad used to be a little too overprotective with his larger-than-life personality. But in recent months, she began to even miss that. At least back then, he clearly showed his care and love for her. Despite the unnecessary emotional expressions, it was goofy, but it was genuine. It had become clear to Videl, as she was growing up into a young adult, that competing for the role of King of Earth had become her father's greatest obsession. Gone were the days of training at Satan Castle, having fun, just simply living, and instead, here, now, were constant meetings, junkets, going over reams of statistics, boring stuff. And while she felt that he had only security and safety in mind, the best of intentions, of course, she could feel that this was wrong for him to do. Since when did he, the mighty Hercule, show any interest or expertise in the art of political theatre? It was just so bizarre to see such a hulking giant hunched over a desk writing down notes for a seminar, going over numbers and crunching sheets and stuff. Okay, maybe it's not that bizarre. Things got so busy that Videl and Hercule would see each other only for sporadic luncheons, and even then, her father was constantly on the phone. Or they had all those bodyguards around them. Yeah, right, bodyguards. This was another annoying thing which got even more pestering when she got her own security detail. They had to follow her everywhere. I mean, it was their job. Videl detested this. But she didn't detest them. I mean, those poor sods were only doing what put food on their tables. On a few occasions though, thanks to her martial arts background, she managed to sneak around them without them looking, running away to have some fun. But when her father started to get wind about this, he got really mad and started firing these bodyguards left and right. She then decided to stop doing this because she didn't want people to lose their jobs because of her. From the 8-foot lummox. It wasn't worth it. Speaking of firing people, her father started to get really impatient. Sure, he was a very impulsive character from the get-go, but he used to be able to wait for things when it called for it. But Videl had noticed that a lot of the workers around the Satan Castle dojo that she'd grown accustomed to, grew up with, were quickly replaced by people who were, let's just say, boring. They were only doing it for the money and not for the passion of the job. The old guard of the castle were very set in their ways and they got things done, but it got done at their pace, not seemingly able to keep up with Hercule's newly found desire for instant results and being king. The old employees weren't that sad though. They were near retirement and took it on the chin. However, Videl couldn't stand it. She had taken it upon herself to save their jobs. She had little battles with her father to keep some of the people that she really liked around. But rarely did she have the chance to have a proper one-on-one discussion with her father. She did the best she could, but it proved to be a losing battle. A normal conversation like they used to have, or maybe a training session in the dojo, these were but distant memories. Now, they could only talk through other people. She was glad that Miss Pizza was still around at least, but even she was incredibly busy these days. Videl rarely had a chance to share her worries with her. There was at least one small victory she had against her dad. This was the fact that after years of sheltering and homeschooling behind the scenes, she was able to choose her own placement of high school. This she held on to with everything she had. A normal high school, a chance to not be in a boarding school, nothing super fancy, just a good but otherwise normal academy, Orange Star High School. She had turned 18 recently, and despite Hercule wanting to control nearly every aspect of her life forever, this was one battle he couldn't win. Well, at least not win and not get extensive media backlash. Still though, Hercule wasn't happy about this. But at the time he was busy with his royal business and affairs, which allowed her to quickly submit her papers before he could say anything against it. It was too late. He was also told that if he just kept his mouth shut this one time and let Videl do this, her daughter would be in the largest high school in his city. So, good PR. So he got persuaded. Again, not wanting to have hours of justifying controlling his own girl. So when she got to that high school, despite everyone knowing who she was, she could at least pretend to herself that she was a normal girl. The bodyguards had been instructed to not enter the premises, as it would unsettle the other students, and Videl was very much okay with that. But despite this, it was hard to make friends. Making real friends, not hangers-on. Were they scared? Or were they being honest? It was hard to tell. But she was doing well enough that she had some time to do other activities like martial arts. But she knew that she could do more. Do more for the city, for the world. But unlike her dad, not from behind a desk. One day, she acted on her thoughts. She simply started to help the police with the ever-growing crime rates. Her bodyguards weren't that thrilled, but she managed to convince them into following her and told them that this would be their little secret. She would make it worth their while. The bodyguards she had recently had were quite relaxed and they trusted her, since she was grown up. They also know she was pretty strong and tough. She wouldn't get hurt. Right? Well, it was all okay until one criminal act was too much. She did wind up getting hurt. I mean, not terribly, but it was enough to actually dislocate her shoulder, and that's not something you could easily conceal. When Hercule had heard about this, he interrupted his work, visiting her when she was getting medical attention in the school nurse's office. "Who did this to you, sweetie?" said Hercule with concern, the first flicker of genuine concern he had conveyed in months to anyone. It's nothing. I tripped." "Trip when? Your after-school activities don't require tripping." Videl looked away. She told Hercule the truth. "What do you mean?" "I was just helping the police make the city safe." "Videl, this is not the job for a young lady." Hercule wasn't mad at her. He never could be truly mad. Not mad, especially after what she said next. "I hope that if I made the city at least a little safer, you may have found some time for me." Hercule couldn't speak for a while. He looked away in the mirror. This little girl had to resort to street fighting to get his attention? What was he doing? He'd been the king for a few years at this point, and he was not seeing the obvious thing that was right in front of him. He missed the thing closest to him. He hugged Videl and whispered, "Don't worry, Videl. Daddy will take care of this. I mean, really take care of this." But before she could say anything else, Hercule stormed off, leaving her in the hands of the doctor. Videl sighed. At least she managed to get through to him in some way. Security. He had to fix it. Make the world better. Starting with his own city and then the world. He met with some shady people who he knew could help with this endeavour, and started something big. Initially, Videl thought that he meant just hanging out with her more often, rebuilding their ties. But the contrary happened. He wound up being more busy. What had happened to that outpouring back in the nurse's office? The only communication she got now from him was a ban on playing police, which, to be fair, she sort of expected, planning to respect that until her shoulder could actually work properly. But she noticed other changes, around her specifically. That cry for help had only made things even more claustrophobic for her. More security details, military instead of the regular bodyguards that she knew. Hercule City now looked like a military stronghold, and this approach was soon emulated in other cities across the planet. Not only that, but lately, some weird laws had been passed, thanks to royal decrees and fast-tracking through the courts, and these acts weren't popular. These greatly limited how people could move around the street, their personal freedom. And Videl heard some rumours, in fact, that the king had planned to give the military permission to search everyone's household without the need of a warrant. They could just show up and demand entry for any reason. That wasn't the conclusion she wanted to get out of her father. She tried to reach out to him, but it only made things worse. All of this curtailing of freedom, that was on her, she thought. It was upsetting her greatly. And surprisingly, the one day which allowed her to kind of forget about some of that stuff was when that new guy turned up at school. He seemed familiar. At first glance, he was a total slouch, but at the same time, she saw some interesting reports from news outlets, and they focused around him. Apparently, there was someone new helping people throughout the city, fighting crime. Though the military types did not appreciate this, they were snuffling in on their turf. But none of them could touch this new force for good. This was a proper superhero, not somebody playing dress-up. This one was named the Great Saiyan Man. As an experiment, she asked some of the remaining detail that were loyal to her to follow this new guy, this Son Gohan, as she had a pretty weird hunch about him. She even checked his surname, and it fitted with a former world martial arts champion from long ago. What was even more puzzling was that the bodyguards couldn't even keep up with this lad. Moreover, he was apparently living not in the city, hundreds of miles away, in fact, in the country. He had no known location in Hercule City, and he was able to commute from Mount Haozu without being late to class. Her bodyguards then suggested turning him into the military, but Vidal wasn't sure about that. She tried to approach Gohan directly, but he was acting like a total nerd. He didn't really realise who she was, which showed that he wasn't very up to date with current affairs. This kid was a total country bumpkin. But one day, when she felt better, she followed him for herself. She still was sneaky enough to escape the bodyguards, as she witnessed Son Gohan changing into his superhero uniform. She confronted him, much to his horror, as he was in a hurry to save people. She said that she could help too, and as such, they saved people from a flaming building nearby. And after that, she demanded to be taught how to fly, and taken away from here, or she would reveal his secret to all. She was serious. She looked just about done with life in this city, and reluctantly, Gohan didn't want to lose his freedom, so she had to go with her plan, as he took her hand and flew off. The poor bodyguards only witnessed the scene of them flying into the distance. Their charge was gone, and they had to talk to the boss. "Sir, we have a problem."
What? Send planes after him! Military! Special forces! Get my baby back, you buffoons! I want everything we got against that heathen!
His two guests were watching this display of anger with a certain curiosity.
I'm sorry, gentlemen, but my daughter got herself into trouble again, and I had no choice but to react. Could you remind me what your name was, short sir?
Oh, it's nothing, Your Highness. I assure you, we understand. My name is Great Barbody, but you can call me Master.
Through the door, the guards could hear a scream, but they just chalked that up to being one of the many outbursts from their boss. No one questioned it, as well as the new tattoo that His Royal Highness now had on his forehead. And that's where we're going to be leaving things for right now. So what do you folks think? Do you feel that things might get worse now that Barbody is using the King of Earth as a puppet? How might Videl and Gohan be able to counter this upcoming pushback? Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going. And I will see you in the next video. Catch you later!